All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. The season is over for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and you could make the case that they were one of the more disappointing teams in the NBA this season. Minnesota got bounced in the first round of the playoffs for the second consecutive year. We never got to see what this team could be potentially, from what they had at the beginning of the year with Carl Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, and D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell was traded to the Los Angeles Lakers just prior to the trade deadline. We also saw Minnesota make a bevy of moves that saw them bring in veteran point guard Mike Conley. But nonetheless, Minnesota's season was basically summed up by what happened in the postseason. You go back to the play-in tournament. In the 7-8 game, Minnesota had a 14-point lead in the third quarter on the road versus the LA Lakers before they faltered and lost. They did rally to knock off the Oklahoma City Thunder to become the eighth seed. But then, even in game five, this past Tuesday night against the Denver Nuggets, Minnesota came out very strong in that contest, got out to the 15-point lead on the Nuggets before things changed. And of course, their season was over. For me, it's gut check time for the T Wolves, as they really just need to figure out what they want to be. And I still believe that this is an immature team that lacks leadership. I look at Carl Anthony Towns, and I've talked about him in the past, and I'm going to say it again. Cat has all of the physical tools, in my opinion, to dominate, but he doesn't. This is a guy who, during the regular season, has averaged 23 points and just north of 11 rebounds per contest. But in the playoffs, those numbers are down as he's only averaging about 18 and a half points in the postseason for his NBA career. We saw that last season in the Timberwolves' first round loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. In the games where Carl Anthony Towns was more assertive, the Timberwolves won. And of course, in the games where he was not, they lost. But on the flip side, what we've seen right now and what we do know is that Anthony Edwards is the real deal. And the former number one pick, he plays with a chip on his shoulder. And to me, Anthony Edwards plays like a guy that was an undrafted player as opposed to being a first overall pick. This past series, alone for the against the Nuggets, rather, excuse me, Edwards averaged 31 and a half points as he really just tried to carry this Minnesota team and put him on their back. But obviously, he can't do it by himself. And put me in the category, and I was like this last summer when it went down. I was not a fan of what Minnesota gave up in order to acquire Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz. To me, with what they gave up, it was kind of like, you're pushing all your chips to the middle of the table. But nonetheless, the deal looked like something that you would do if you were a player away from winning a championship. The Timberwolves are not a player away from winning a championship. Rudy Gobert, obviously in his time with Utah and still now in Minnesota, is an offensive liability. But then you bring him in for his defense, and it simply just did not work. You look at it first and foremost with both Gobert and Towns. You're talking about two guys that are 7 feet, and then of course Gobert's case a little bit more. They got out rebounded throughout the series by the Denver Nuggets. And then, of course, Nikola Jokic is the two-time reigning NBA MVP, possibly a three-time NBA MVP. I get it. And I'm not taking anything away from the Joker because he is a bad dude on the court. But nonetheless, he just simply did whatever he wanted to do. And if Rudy Gobert, you bring him in as a defensive presence, that cannot occur. So obviously, this trade has not worked out for Minnesota, especially when you gave up so much for him and you're still one and done in the NBA playoffs. There is just not a Rudy Gobert side. There is just too much talent on this Minnesota team to consistently be one and done in the playoffs. Something has to change. You look at it already between Gobert and Towns for next season. the Timberwolves are committed to $77 million between the two of them. And let's not forget, it's only going to be a matter of time before Anthony Edwards is going to be getting a max extension. Now, in my opinion, Edwards needs to be playing off of Towns, but in actuality, it's going to be more like Towns playing off of Edwards. And I say that because of the two, Anthony Edwards is the more aggressive one on the offensive end of the floor. For me, with Carl Anthony Towns, 15 feet and in and even 10 feet in and in, there's not too many people in the NBA that can stop him. But the thing is, Carl Anthony Towns too often settles for the perimeter game. The defensive effort is not always there. And then, of course, the aggressiveness close to the basket is not always there as well. And that's why, in my opinion, where the Timberwolves, or part of the reason why the Timberwolves do come up short in these situations. And getting back to Carl Anthony Towns, what does he want to be? And in my opinion, I know that Anthony Edwards is really blossoming with this team. But just like I said last year when the Timberwolves lost to Memphis, Minnesota is only going to go as far as Carl Anthony Towns takes them. If he wants to take over and dominate, the sky is the limit for this team. If Carl Anthony Towns wants to just play, then Minnesota is going to be able to consistently make the playoffs, but they're going to consistently have results like we're seeing right now, being one of the first teams eliminated from these NBA playoffs. But getting back to Cat, you look at it. He's played with Andrew Wiggins. He's played with Jimmy Butler and now Anthony Edwards. And with all of that, he's still been unable to get out of the first round. So you think about another Minnesota Timberwolves big, the legendary Kevin Garnett. The story was consistently, what if KG had some help? So imagine if KG had help like this during his prime years in Minnesota. Maybe his career would have been different. Nonetheless, the Timberwolves have given Carl Anthony Towns that help, but still the results have not showed up in the postseason. I know that not having Jaden McDaniels and Nas Reed uh, during the playoffs definitely hurt the Minnesota Timberwolves, but nonetheless, you looked at a team that their head coach even said, Chris Finch, you know, we played with the urgency in game 4 and game 5. But at the end of the day, where was that sense of urgency in games 1 through 3? It's the playoffs. And I say that from the situation where, the possessions matter more. Each possession at the offensive end and the defensive end, because they can be the make or break situation for your respective team. What if the Timberwolves had played like they did in games 4 and 5? If they had played like that for games 1 through 3, maybe, just maybe, we're talking about a different situation for this club right here. You got to go out there and seize the moment. And I think that is where the lack of maturity factor comes in for this team. So heading into this summer, what is general manager Tim Connolly and head coach Chris Finch going to do for this team? It's going to be interesting to see what the Timberwolves do to try to take that next step. And I think it's going to come from within. Again, there's too much talent on this team to be one and done. Minnesota has all of the tools to be one of the top 4 teams in the Western Conference. Minnesota has all of the tools to make a deep run into the postseason, but it has to come from within as far as what this team is going to be. Just like I said last year, this team comes down to what Carl Anthony Towns wants to be. If he just wants to consistently be a 20-10 guy, you know what? That's fine. But at the end of the day, the Timberwolves are only going to go so far. Anthony Edwards is the real deal. You see the hunger, you see the passion that he plays with. But unfortunately for the rest of the team, it is not that infectious. So at the end of the day, the Minnesota Timberwolves are one of the biggest enigmas in the NBA because they could be better. And I have a feeling that not a lot is going to change in the Twin Cities. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.